Hello friends, welcome back my YouTube channel. If you want to watch the super hit movie Terminator Genisys in full HD, then first of all, give this video a like, and if you are visiting our channel for the first time, then subscribe to this channel. The name of the movie we are going to discuss in today's video is Terminator Genisys. So, we will give you information about how and where you will get to watch Terminator Genisys film officially. Apart from this, we will give you a detailed look at the pre-production, post-production, budget, box office collection, and filming of this movie. A detailed review of the movie will also be given in this video, where we will explain the story of this movie in detail. We will also discuss the cast and casting performance of the movie. Apart from this, information about the music department and technical department will also be given. Because of this video is going to be very interesting and entertaining. So you must watch this video till the end. And if you haven't liked this video yet, then like this video now and subscribe to this channel. So, let's start the video. Terminator Genisys is a 2015 American action film that is the fifth installment in the Terminator franchise. It is a reboot of the franchise, taking the premise of the original film in another direction and ignoring the events depicted in sequels and the television series. The film stars Arnold Schwarzenegger, who reprises his role as the Terminator. It is directed by Alan Taylor and written by Leda Kalogridis and Patrick Lussier. Along with Schwarzenegger, the film's cast features Jason Clarke, Emilia Clarke, Jai Courtney, J.K. Simmons, Deo Okoniyi, Matt Smith, Courtney B. Vance, Michael Gladys, Sandrine Holt, and Lee Byung-hun. The story follows Kyle Reese, a soldier in a post-apocalyptic war against Skynet, who is sent from 2029 to 1984 to prevent Sarah Connor's death. When Kyle arrives in the past, he discovers that the timeline has been altered by Skynet and that Sarah has been raised by a reprogrammed Terminator sent to protect her. Sequels for Terminator Salvation, 2009, were canceled after franchise owner the Halcyon Company filed for bankruptcy. Megan Ellison and her production company, Annapurna Pictures, acquired the franchise rights in May 2011. Skydance Productions, owned by Ellison's brother David, collaborated the following year on a production of another installment in the series. The Ellisons consulted Terminator creator James Cameron and drew inspiration from the Terminator, 1984, and its sequel Terminator 2, Judgment Day, 1991. Principal photography took place primarily in New Orleans, but also in San Francisco. 6 companies handled the film's visual effects, with its prosthetic makeup and animatronics created by Legacy Effects. The film premiered at the Dolby Theater in Hollywood on June 28, 2015, and was released in the United States on July 1st. It was largely panned by the critics, who lambasted the plot and storyline, although the visual effects and action sequences saw some praise, as did Schwarzenegger's return to the franchise. Terminator Genisys grossed $440.6 million worldwide, making it the second highest grossing film of both the series and Schwarzenegger's career, behind Terminator 2, Judgment Day. However, its commercial performance was lower than anticipated, resulting in the cancellation of 2 planned sequels and a spin-off television series. A video game titled Terminator Genisys: Future War was released on May 18, 2017, and the film franchise moved forward with Terminator: Dark Fate, released in 2019 as a direct sequel to Terminator 2: Judgment Day. Plot: in 2029, human resistance leader John Connor launches a final offensive against Skynet, an artificial general intelligence system seeking to eliminate the human race. Before the resistance can triumph, Skynet activates a time machine and sends a T-800 Model 101 Terminator back to 1984 to kill John's mother, Sarah. John's right-hand man, Kyle Reese, volunteers to travel back in time to protect her. As Kyle floats in the machine's magnetic field, he sees John being attacked by another resistance soldier. This creates a temporal paradox that alters the timeline and causes Kyle to experience childhood memories from a parallel version of himself. When it arrives in 1984 Los Angeles, Skynet's T-800 is disabled by Sarah and Pops, a reprogrammed T-800. An unknown party had sent Pops to 1973 to protect Sarah when she was 9 years old after her parents were killed by a T-1000 sent by Skynet. When Kyle arrives in 1984, he is intercepted by the T-1000, which Sarah and Pops destroy with acid. Sarah and Pops have constructed a makeshift time machine like Skynet's, and Sarah plans to stop Skynet by traveling to 1997, the year it becomes self-aware. However, realizing that the past has been altered, Kyle is convinced that the future has also changed. He recalls a warning he received in his childhood vision, convincing Sarah that they instead must travel to 2017 to stop Skynet. After fighting the T-1000, Pops has sustained exterior damage that prevents him from time traveling. He stays in 1984 and plans to meet up with Kyle and Sarah in the future, preparing for their arrival in the meantime. In 2017, Kyle and Sarah materialize in the middle of a busy San Francisco highway and are apprehended by city police. While they are treated for injuries, Sarah and Kyle learn that Skynet is called Genisys, a soon-to-be-unveiled global operating system which is embraced by the public. John suddenly appears and rescues Sarah and Kyle. Pops arrives and unexpectedly shoots John, revealing that John is now an advanced Terminator. The resistance soldier who attacked John is revealed to have been Skynet in physical disguise as a Terminator. While Kyle was traveling back in time, Skynet attacked John and infected him with nanomachines that converted him into a cyborg on a cellular level. John, brainwashed to ensure Skynet's creation, traveled back in time to assist Cyberdyne Systems with the development of Genisys, hence securing Skynet and its machines' rise. Pops fights John before trapping him long enough for them to escape. A day before Skynet's worldwide attack, Sarah, Kyle, and Pops retreat to a safe house and make final preparations to destroy Cyberdyne's Genisys mainframe. They head toward Cyberdyne's headquarters with John in close pursuit. During an airborne chase, Pops dive bombs into John's helicopter and causes it to crash. John survives the crash and enters the Cyberdyne complex, where it advances the countdown from 13 hours to 15 minutes. Kyle, Sarah, and Pops plant bombs at key points in the facility while holding off John. In a final battle, Pops traps John in the magnetic field of a prototype time machine. Both are destroyed, but just before the explosion, Pops' remains are flung out of the apparatus into a nearby vat of experimental mimetic polyalloy. Kyle and Sarah reach a bunker beneath the facility, and the explosion sets off the bombs, preventing Genisys from coming online. Pops appears, upgraded with mimetic polyalloy components like that of the T-1000, and helps them escape from the debris. The trio travels to Kyle's childhood home, where Kyle tells his younger self about Genisys and instructs him to repeat the warning to himself, securing the trio's arrival from 1984. Sarah, Kyle, and Pops drive off into the countryside. A mid-credits scene reveals that the system core of Genisys, located in a protected subterranean chamber, has survived the explosion. Cast. See also, list of Terminator characters. Arnold Schwarzenegger as the Terminator. A reprogrammed T-800 Terminator who is Sarah's protector and mentor. Brett Azar stood in on set as the body double for the T-800 Terminator of the first film who time-traveled to 1984, and The Young Guardian in 1973. Production. Development. Although Terminator Salvation was intended to begin a new trilogy, the production of a fifth film was put on hold because of legal issues with franchise owner the Halcyon Company, which filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in August 2009. To avoid bankruptcy, Halcyon later decided to sell the rights to the franchise and valued the property at $70 million. On February 8, 2010, the franchise was auctioned for $29.5 million to Pacificor, a hedge fund which was the largest creditor in Halcyon's bankruptcy proceedings. The deal erased Halcyon's debts to Pacificor and guaranteed Halcyon $5 million for each additional Terminator sequel produced to pay other outstanding debts. Pacificor sold the franchise again in May 2010. In August of that year, Hanover House announced plans to develop a 3D animated film titled Terminator 3000. Pacificor responded with a cease and desist letter, declining a $20-30 million offer from Hanover for the rights to produce the film. In February 2011, Universal Studios considered investing in a fifth Terminator film with Arnold Schwarzenegger returning to the title role, Fast and Furious director Justin Lin at the helm, and Chris Morgan as the screenwriter. In late April 2011, a proposed Terminator package, dropping Morgan and adding producer Robert W. Court, was presented to Universal Studios, Sony, Lionsgate, and CBS Films. Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, MGM, had a 30-day right of first refusal to finance and distribute Terminator 5 since 2006. It was eventually picked up by Megan Ellison and her production company, Annapurna Pictures, in May 2011 after they purchased at auction the rights to make at least 2 more Terminator films. The deal was finalized on December 4, 2012. The final price was reportedly less than the auction pledge, because new copyright laws had raised concerns that the rights would revert to Terminator creator James Cameron in 2019. Ellison's brother David and others from his Skydance Productions agreed to co-produce the film. After acquiring the rights to the franchise, Megan Ellison asked Cameron for input on the new film. Cameron met several times with David Ellison, where they discussed Schwarzenegger's role and how to remain true to the T-800 character. Director Justin Lin had to leave the project because of his involvement in Fast and Furious 6. 2 screenwriters, Leda Kalogridis of Shutter Island and Patrick Lussier of Drive Angry, were commissioned to write the screenplay in January 2013. Kalogridis and Lussier turned down the project 3 times, but Cameron persuaded them to accept it. Paramount Pictures, which has a financing and distribution deal with Skydance, was confirmed as the distributor in June 2013, when they and the producers announced a release date of June 26, 2015. Rian Johnson, Denis Villeneuve, and Ang Lee were approached to take over direction from Lin, but Thor: The Dark World director Alan Taylor was selected in September 2013. Storyboard artist Jane Wu, Taylor's girlfriend, urged him to turn down the offer after reading the script, insisting him that he should direct something more personal and that he loved, but Taylor was persuaded and tempted with the prospect of working with Schwarzenegger, who impressed him during their meetings, and the chance to build on the legacy of Cameron's franchise, respectively. Taylor felt that he should direct the film due to his love for the first 2 Terminator films, believing that he could fix the script and make the film work. In January 2014, Megan Ellison announced that Annapurna was no longer credited on the film. Skydance and Paramount would provide funding, and Ellison would be credited as an executive producer. Casting. On June 13, 2013, Schwarzenegger said that he would return for his 4th film as the Terminator. By early November, Garrett Hedlund was under consideration for the role of Kyle Reese, and Taylor wanted Tom Hardy to portray John Connor. That month, the choice for Sarah Connor was narrowed to Emilia Clarke, Tatiana Maslany, and Brie Larson, and Clarke was selected in December. Paramount had wanted Larson for the role, but Taylor preferred Emilia Clarke. In December 2013, Jason Clarke, who is not related to Emilia, was in negotiations to play John Connor. Jason Clarke was David Ellison's first choice for the role. He was impressed by Clarke's performance in Megan Ellison's film Zero Dark 30, 2012. In February 2014, the studio considered Jai Courtney and Boyd Holbrook as Reese, and later that month, Courtney was confirmed for the role. J.K. Simmons began talks for the role of Detective O'Brien in March. According to late March announcements, Dio Okanii would play Danny Dyson and Lee Byung-hun. Michael Gladys and Sandrine Holt joined the cast, Lee in a key role. Matt Smith was confirmed as a cast member in May, followed by Douglas Smith in June. Writing. The film's producers, David Ellison and Dana Goldberg, worked with writers Leda Kalogridis and Patrick Lussier to devise the story. Kalogridis and Lussier were invited to write the script while they worked on another project with Ellison and Goldberg. They agreed to write a Terminator film when Cameron, a friend of Kalogridis who worked with her in Avatar, gave it his blessing. The starting point of the script was to retain Schwarzenegger as a central character, unlike the Star Trek reboot with Leonard Nimoy as an older Spock in a minor role. They had to write in the actor, now 67 years old, and followed a suggestion by Cameron that the Terminator's living tissue exterior was vulnerable to aging, and their idea of Skynet sending a Terminator after an infant Sarah Connor. Kalogridis and Lucia extended this to the core characters of Kyle, Sarah, and John Connor, despite each being from a different time period. Although the writers reportedly enjoyed Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines, they opted to escape its suggestion that Judgment Day is inevitable because of a causal loop in favor of all Terminator timelines existing simultaneously in a multiverse. To map out the timelines and plot, Kalogridis and Lucia had 5 whiteboards covering every wall in the office. They eventually reached a central plot thread in which the Skynet of one universe, defeated in several timelines, sent the T-5000 to the Genisys timeline, hoping to defeat the humans by having the best weapon that humans have, John Connor. The first draft of the screenplay, to attract a director, was delivered in July 2013. Few changes were made to the script from that point onward. One expansive scene that was removed from the final script would have explained what Sarah Connor's life was like with Pops. The film is inspired by the first 2 Terminator films from Cameron, The Terminator and Terminator 2: Judgment Day, while largely ignoring the 2 subsequent films that came before Genisys. Concepts from the second movie, such as the T-1000, are featured, but its events are disregarded. The 2029 that is depicted in Genisys is one in which the attack on the Cyberdyne building either had no effect on Skynet's development or did not happen at all, as August 29, 1997 is still the date of Judgment Day in that timeline. David Ellison described the film and its intended film trilogy as standalone projects based on Cameron's original Terminator films. Ellison said the film is neither a sequel or a prequel to previous Terminator films, saying, "For us, this is Terminator 1, this is not Terminator 5. A Skydance executive said, "It's not a traditional remake, nor is it a continuation or a sequel, nor is it exactly a reboot. In a sense, it's a reimagining." The film features 7 different time periods, with 1984 and 2017 being the primary setting for the story. Taylor said the film's storyline would be more complex in comparison to the original 2 films because of its time travel aspect. He also described the original Terminator film as a love story and the second as a father/son story, and said that Genisys would be a combination of the 2 ideas, including a focus on the aspect of a dysfunctional family. David Ellison said the film was inspired by the idea of technological singularity, stating that in reality, humans are addicted to technology to the point where it's easy to imagine a world where Skynet has infiltrated every single aspect of your life, and you didn't fight it, you invited it in. Filming. Principal photography began on April 21, 2014, in New Orleans. The film shot under the code name Vista, a possible reference to the Terminator's Hasta la Vista line in Terminator 2: Judgment Day. The first unit shot the film over a total of 90 days in high definition. An early sequence from the Terminator is recreated in Terminator Genisys, in which Kyle Reese and a T-800 arrive in 1984 from the future. Because the original film was owned by a different company, the filmmakers did not have the rights to use its opening sequence in Terminator Genisys, and instead had to recreate the scenes. In addition, Taylor explained that the original footage would not look right with the rest of the film due to its grain quality. The sequence was shot within the first 2 weeks of filming. The T-800's arrival in 1984 takes place at Griffith Park in Los Angeles, a location that was recreated as a set in New Orleans. To authentically recreate one of the scenes, costume designer Susan Matheson had Nike produce new pairs of discontinued Nike Vandal sneakers for Courtney to wear. Matheson had initially searched for a pair of the sneakers, but the ones that she came across did not look new enough for the scene. Matheson eventually spoke to Paramount, which convinced Nike to produce 25 pairs of Vandal sneakers for the film. For certain scenes, the production tried to match the cinematography of the first 2 Terminator films. Scenes set in 1984 favored blue, green, and black tones to match the look of the Terminator, and those set during the future war against the machines were modeled after similar scenes in Terminator 2: Judgment Day. For the future soldiers, arm and shoulder pieces were made of rubber car mats which had been cut up and aged to simulate makeshift armor that the soldiers had salvaged. Legacy Effects, successor to Stan Winston's studio, created the Terminator robotic and makeup effects, led by John Rosengrant, who worked on the previous 4 Terminator films. Jeff Dawn, lead makeup artist for the first 3 installments, did not return. To prepare for his role, Jason Clarke observed Edward Furlong's performance as John Connor in Terminator 2: Judgment Day. For a scene in which John Connor delivers a motivational speech to his troops, Jason Clarke referred to passages from Hamlet, Henry V, and a Steve Jobs speech. Courtney watched the previous Terminator films for context and inspiration, but did not seek to replicate the performances of actors who portrayed Kyle Reese in those films. Courtney and Emilia Clarke underwent physical training to prepare for their roles. Courtney had to slim down his physique to appear less imposing. Clarke also went through training for scenes involving weapons and stunts and had to change her hair color for the role. Clarke, who is from the UK, adopted an American accent. One scene is shot as a flashback to the 1970s, during which young Sarah Connor is played by Taylor's 11-year-old daughter, Willa Taylor. Filming in New Orleans included NASA's Michoud Assembly Facility, where a set was constructed to portray part of the Cyberdyne facility's interior, as well as its time machine. Michoud was the only location in Louisiana tall enough to contain the set. Filming took place there during July 2014. The Oracle Corporation headquarters in Redwood City served as the exterior of Cyberdyne. Oracle was founded by the Ellison's father, Larry. Filming at the Oracle headquarters, including interior scenes, took place at the end of July 2014. In early August 2014, filming took place at the Bay Bridge and Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. Scenes involving cable cars and stunt automobiles were shot on San Francisco's California Street from the night of August 4th to the early hours of August 5th, 2014. Because of the late-night filming, the production team had to receive approval from residents and business owners in the area. Nearly 99% of them approved the shoot. Filming would also take place on Mission Street, in which extras flee from a threat, which would be added in later through computer-generated technology. The scenes would depict chaotic city scenes. Subtle action scenes were also scheduled to continue at the Golden Gate Bridge. One scene features a school bus that is flipped through the air while driving on the Golden Gate Bridge. A 500-foot-long replica of the bridge was built in New Orleans for the shot involving the bus flip, something that was done without visual effects. Scroggins Aviation Mock-Up and Effects was called in to fabricate and build the police AS-350 and Coast Guard A-109 helicopter mock-ups for the production. On August 6, 2014, it was announced that filming had concluded and that the official title would be Terminator Genisys rather than Terminator Genisys. Ellison later said about the film's Genisys title, "It didn't work. The actual thought process behind it was, we were kind of playing on words a la Google, and it's in reference to Genesis, which is in reference to the singularity and the man-machine hybrid that John Connor ends up beginning. Also, if you pronounce it a different way, it signals a new beginning. So it was kind of a play on words, and it did not come across that way." At one point during post-production, the mid-credits scene was included at the end of the film, before the credits. Taylor decided to make it a mid-credits scene after getting reactions from test audiences. Visual effects. Visual effects supervisor Janik Surs oversaw approximately 1,200 visual effects shots generated at Double Negative, Moving Picture Company, MPC, Industrial Light and Magic, ILM, Lola VFX, One of Us, and Method Studios. Double Negative was the lead company with 900 shots, which included the T-1000, T-5000, and T-3000 Terminators, the helicopter and bus chase scenes, and the Cyberdyne explosion. The complexity of the T-3000, which had to be shown as a living mass of nanomites with the ability to transform in successive layers, required as much as 20 hours to render a single frame. The mechanical cells aimed to resemble the material on stealth aircraft, with a result described as more matte than metal, and resembling a slightly iridescent ceramic carbon. Since the T-3000 was a man transformed into a robot, the design aimed for a human shape streamlined for better combat efficiency. The T-1000 was built from fluid simulations, their environments filmed with high-resolution cameras to ensure proper reflection. Its acid destruction was realistically depicted after studies of acids burning aluminum ingots and other metal. Double negatives artists shot many reference plates of San Francisco, including scans of the Golden Gate Bridge, to ensure that the city was recreated properly in the bus and helicopter chases. MPC's most elaborate effect was the digital recreation of the original Terminator, which required 12 months for 35 shots, completed 30 minutes before the final print was submitted to the studio. Performance capture was used only for facial animation, since Schwarzenegger was scanned reading his lines. The studio's artists studied archive footage of the actor, focusing mainly on the Terminator and pumping iron, and were given a 1984 plaster cast of him. On set, the fight between both Terminators had Schwarzenegger and Brett Ezar, a bodybuilder chosen for his resemblance to the actor in 1984, and in more dangerous scenes, Azar and a stunt double, requiring effects artists to replace the face of Pops. MPC also handled the future battle, with set extensions and Skynet robots and vehicles based on models by Legacy Effects. ILM did the opening scene, in which San Francisco is wiped out on Judgment Day, inspired by the Los Angeles nuclear destruction in Terminator 2 Judgment Day, and the Terminator Vision. For the IMAX 3D release, the film was remastered with IMAX DMR technology to create 3D effects and a high-resolution film print. Music. Main article, Terminator Genisys. Christoph Beck was initially hired to score the film, but was replaced by Lorne Balfe. Hans Zimmer joined in as an executive music producer. Balfe aimed to create a soundtrack which stood in its own, since Terminator Genisys is not a prequel and not a sequel, incorporating Brad Fiedel's iconic theme in The Terminator, as it had a nod to the past, but also bring it into the future. The soundtrack was released by Paramount Music and Skydance Media on June 17, 2015. Chinese pop singer Jane Zhang in her first English-language recording, and hip-hop artist Big Sean in his musical feature film debut, contributed Fighting Shadows, released by Def Jam Recordings on June 30, 2015, as a soundtrack bonus track. Release, marketing and controversy. Photos of the cast were shot by Entertainment Weekly and published in October 2014, providing a first look at the film's characters. The photos received various criticism. On December 2, 2014, Paramount released the film's first motion poster, showing a T-800 disintegrating into dust before the logo appeared. A preview trailer was released the following day, with brief clips from the film accompanied by I'd Love to Change the World by Jetta. Differing from past Terminator releases, the preview had forced-looking camera motion in aerial effect scenes and a first look at the color grading used to evoke the look of past films. The full trailer debuted on December 4th. A second trailer, released in April 2015, was noted for spoiling the scene in which John Connor becomes a Terminator, a decision criticized by Alan Taylor and the writers. At the WWE pay-per-view event WrestleMania 31, the film was promoted with an elaborate entrance stage for wrestler Triple H. On the stage, Triple H donning a Terminator outfit and a video played of Schwarzenegger saying, "Judgment Day is here. It's time to play the game." Several brands were promotional partners. On June 14th, Schwarzenegger visited Marine Corps Base Camp Pendleton for an advanced screening of Terminator Genisys. 2 days later, Waze added Schwarzenegger's Terminator voice as a voice navigation option. Schwarzenegger released a video that day of himself walking around Hollywood dressed as the Terminator and posing as a wax model at Madame Tussauds Hollywood. The video promoted a fundraising contest to benefit the After School All-Stars, which would bring selected donors to the Terminator Genisys premiere. Several YouTubers appeared with Schwarzenegger in a YouTube miniseries, Terminator Genisys, The YouTube Chronicles, produced by Heresy and released on June 22nd. Consisting of videos uploaded by Machinima, Lily Singh, and Toby Turner, who also plays the T360, a similar model of the T1000. The series also included Elliot Dewberry, Ricky Hayberg, Olga Kay, Sean Klitzner, Lloyd Alquist, and Matthew Santoro. The series was directed by Charles Paik and written by Jay Bushman. On June 24th, Schwarzenegger spoke to attendees of an early fan screening of the movie in New York City, announced on Reddit, which was followed by an interview and selfie session. Theatrical. Terminator Genisys saw its European premiere in Berlin on June 21, 2015, and had its North American premiere at the Dolby Theatre in Hollywood 1 week later on June 28th. The film was first released in 10 markets on June 25th. The following week, it was released in 35 countries, including the United States, in regular, Real 3D and IMAX 3D formats. On July 26th, the film was playing in 64 countries outside North America and was released in China on August 23, 2015. Home media. The film was released for digital download on October 20, 2015, and was released by Paramount Home Entertainment on DVD, Blu-ray, and Blu-ray 3D on November 10th. Terminator Genisys debuted as the best-selling Blu-ray and the most rented film of the week, and was second in overall home video sales to Inside Out. It has grossed over $25.1 million in total domestic video sales, bringing the film's gross to $465.3 million. A 4K UHD Blu-ray release occurred on June 12, 2018. Reception. Box office. Terminator Genisys grossed $89.7 million in the United States and Canada and $350.8 million in other territories, for a worldwide total of $440.6 million. Of the Terminator franchise, only Terminator 2: Judgment Day earned more at the box office. Because of its $155 million production budget and an estimated $100 million spent on marketing, Bloomberg Business reported that the film would have needed to earn at least $450 million in its theatrical run to break even. In August 2015, Forbes cited Terminator Genisys as the first American film to earn $400 million worldwide without grossing $100 million in North America, earnings comparable to the French film The Intouchables. It was the first Hollywood release to earn $100 million in China and less than that in North America. Both were duplicated the following summer by Warcraft. North America. The film opened on July 1, 2015 in the United States and Canada, the same day as the comedy drama Magic Mike XXL, in 3,700 theaters, and previewed the previous evening in 2,527 theaters. The two films and the holdovers Jurassic World and Inside Out were each projected to earn $45 to $55 million during the Independence Day holiday period and $27 to $30 million over the three-day weekend. Box office analysts noted that Terminator Genisys would have to compete with Jurassic World and to some extent Ted 2 for male moviegoers. They expected the film to have the upper hand, replacing Jurassic World in IMAX theaters, but good earnings were needed internationally to make up any deficits. It made $2.3 million from the Tuesday night preview, a record for Paramount Pictures, surpassing the $2.1 million earned by Hercules 2014 and $8.9 million on its Wednesday opening day. The film earned $42.4 million over the 5-day opening stretch, including $27 million from 3,758 theaters over the weekend, placing it third at the box office behind Jurassic World and Inside Out. Scott Mendelson of Forbes suggested several possible explanations for its box office performance: poor marketing, negative reviews, competition from the family-friendly Jurassic World and Inside Out, the decline of Schwarzenegger's star power, and American indifference to another Terminator film. Other territories. During the weekend of August 2, 2015, Terminator Genisys was playing in 65 countries, including the US and Canada. The film was released in China on August 23rd. Comparisons of overseas box office performance were made with Paramount's Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol 2011, Pacific Rim, Lucy, and World War Z rather than the preceding Terminator Salvation 2009 and the other Terminator films. The film was released in 10 countries before its North American debut beginning on June 25th, earning $8.4 million over its opening weekend. During its second weekend, it expanded to 46 countries, earning $73.3 million and topping the international box office before being passed by Minions the following weekend. The film led in box office receipts outside North America for 4 non-consecutive weekends. Terminator Genisys had the franchise's biggest opening and Schwarzenegger's best in Singapore, 1.4 million, and Colombia, 1.3 million. Both exceeded the opening of Terminator Salvation and that of 28 other countries, including Russia, Korea, and Mexico. The film topped the box office in Peru, Vietnam, Turkey, and 28 other countries, was Paramount's biggest Argentine opening, 2.3 million, and was the biggest July opening and the 5th biggest of all time in Russia and the CIS, $12.5 million. In the UK and Brazil, it opened behind Minions, earning $5.8 million and $3.9 million, respectively, and was second in France to Le Profs 2 with $3.8 million. Other notable openings were in South Korea, $11.2 million, Mexico, $6.1 million, Japan, $5.4 million, Australia, $4.4 million, Germany, $3.1 million. Its largest markets outside the US and Canada were South Korea, $23.5 million, Russia, $21.8 million, Japan, $19 million, the UK, $16.1 million, and Brazil, $11.1 million. Terminator Genisys earned $2.2 million from Chinese midnight showings, the 4th largest of all time, and $27.4 million on its opening day, the 4th biggest opening day of all time for a Hollywood film, behind Furious 7, Avengers, Age of Ultron, and Transformers, Age of Extinction. It topped the international box office with a one-day gross from China. The film earned $82.8 million in its 8-day opening week, Sunday to Sunday, $58 million from Monday to Sunday, and $23.4 million in its 3-day opening weekend, Friday to Sunday. As of September 12, 2015, Terminator Genisys had grossed $112.8 million in China. Critical response. Review aggregator Rotten Tomatoes reports an approval rating of 26% based on 278 reviews, with an average rating of 4.710. The website's critical consensus reads, "Mired in its muddled mythology, Terminator Genisys is a lurching retread that lacks the thematic depth, conceptual intelligence, or visual thrills that launched this once mighty franchise." On Metacritic, which assigns a weighted average to critic reviews, the film has a score of 38 out of 100, based on 41 critics, indicating generally unfavorable reviews. Audiences polled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of B+ on an A+ to F scale. The Los Angeles Times said critics found the film to be a messy sequel that was a convoluted retread of past films. According to The Wrap, critics found the time travel storyline to be convoluted and that the performances were unremarkable, aside from Schwarzenegger reprising his role. Joe Morgenstern of the Wall Street Journal criticized the film, saying that it plays like the worst of all outcomes. James Rocky of The Wrap compared it negatively to The Terminator, writing that Genisys comes back from the past to water down a whole season of summer moviegoing. Michael Phillips of the Chicago Tribune criticized the film's lack of originality, calling it simply business and dull business at that. Mark Kermode of The Observer described it as marginally better than Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines, or Terminator Salvation, but still light years short of either The Terminator or Terminator 2 Judgment Day, considering it utterly unnecessary, if occasionally entertaining. He added, Cameron's original 80s production wrung rip-roaring rewards from a smart script and a small budget, but this bloated, smashy-crashy behemoth lacks the role reversal wit that turned the action of 1991's T2 into something more than mere spectacle. Alan Jones of Radio Times awarded the film 2 stars out of 5, writing, confusing time travel, lackluster spectacle, and bland casting earmark this unexceptional reboot of James Cameron's classic Cyborg v. Man franchise for the smartphone generation. He also regarded the CG action as unimaginative. Michael O'Sullivan of The Washington Post enjoyed the film. Genisys goes back to what made the franchise work in the first place, not the machine inside the man, but vice versa. Richard Lawson of Vanity Fair also gave a positive review, writing that the film makes a surprisingly compelling case for itself. After seeing a pre-release screening of the film, Cameron voiced his support for Terminator Genisys. Describing it as respectful to the first two films, Cameron said he felt like the franchise has been reinvigorated. However, in 2017, following the film's performance, Cameron recanted his statement and said that he had only supported the film because of his friendship with Schwarzenegger. Actress Emilia Clarke expressed relief to discover there would not be any sequels following the film's underwhelming box office performance. In reference to the film's director Alan Taylor, with whom she had worked on Game of Thrones, Clarke said, "He was eaten and chewed up on Terminator. He was not the director I remembered. He didn't have a good time. No one had a good time." In a 2021 interview with The Hollywood Reporter while promoting The Many Saints of Newark, Taylor admitted as having lost the will to make movies and to live as a director after his experience directing Genisys and Thor: The Dark World, causing him to enter into a depression. He credited his work on a television pilot based on the novel Roadside Picnic and in the Amazon video series Electric Dreams for helping him to come out of his depression upon rediscovering the joy of filmmaking by making a couple really tiny things, slowly, smaller and personal, like the films he did as a film student. The production of the film was seen as so disastrous that a nearby crew filming for Fantastic Four even had jackets made that read, "At least we're not on Terminator." Accolade. At the 2015 Teen Choice Awards, Terminator Genisys earned 2 nominations for Choice Summer Movie and Choice Summer Movie Star, female, Emilia Clarke. It was also nominated at the Golden Trailer Awards for Best Summer 2015 Blockbuster. At the 42nd Saturn Awards, the film received a nomination for Best Science Fiction Film. Other media. Canceled sequels and television series. In December 2013, The Hollywood Reporter reported that a television series was in the works, which would tie into a new Terminator film trilogy. Sequels to Terminator Genisys were scheduled for release on May 19, 2017 and June 29, 2018, under the tentative titles of Terminator 2 and Terminator 3, but they were ultimately canceled. The 2 sequels were to be filmed back-to-back during 9 months of continuous shooting. The storylines for the 2 sequels were devised by Calogridis and Lucier. The new trilogy would have explained who sent Pops back to protect Sarah Connor. J.K. Simmons would have had further involvement in the new trilogy, and Deo Okaniyi would have had a significant role reprising Danny Dyson in the second film, which would have focused on John Connor's life after becoming part machine. Jason Clarke said about the canceled Genisys sequel, "What I remember was that second one was going to be about John's journey after he was taken by Skynet, like going down to what he became, half machine, half man. That's where the second one was going to start, and that's about all I knew. It's such a bummer we didn't get to do that." Development stalled in 2015 after Terminator Genisys underperformed at the box office. On October 1, 2015, The Hollywood Reporter confirmed that the sequels and television spin-off were on hold indefinitely, following the film's overall box office performance. According to Skydance COO Dana Goldberg, the company was pressing forward with development, but would further analyze market research before starting production. In January 2016, the planned Terminator 2 was removed from Paramount's release schedule. In April 2016, Emilia Clarke said that she would not return for any sequels. Video game. In June 2016, following the cancellation of film sequels and a spin-off television series, a video game titled Terminator Genisys: Future War was revealed to be in development. The game's storyline would take place immediately following the events of Terminator Genisys. Future War was released on May 18, 2017. James Cameron's return. Main article, Terminator Dark Fate. Ultimately, the film rights to the Terminator franchise reverted to co-creator James Cameron, who, along with David Ellison, produced a new film, Terminator Dark Fate, a direct sequel to Terminator 2 Judgment Day. It was intended to be the first in a new trilogy of planned Terminator films, though they were later canceled due to the film's poor box office returns. Terminator Dark Fate was directed by Tim Miller and featured the return of Schwarzenegger and Hamilton. It was released on November 1, 2019, to better critical reception than previous entries, though it was nevertheless a commercial failure. The central thrust of the scattered, clanging, and unwieldy Terminator Genisys is that the cloud will destroy us all. Now, they don't exactly call it the cloud, as they do in last year's sex tape. But maybe that straining Cameron Diaz-Jason Segel comedy was onto something when it warned us that uploading information and then syncing all our electronic devices to each other might be a dangerous thing after all. Here, this revolutionary but ethereal system is called Genisys. It goes online on a specific day in 2017. There's a countdown clock and everything in an effort to magnify the tension. It's even a pleasing shade of light blue. And while it promises to link your phone, tablet, laptop, etc., the convenience it offers might come at a cost. It might, mean the end of the world as we know it. We're all on our devices too much, anyway. Heads down, necks craned, eyes glazed, clueless to our surroundings, and careless about other actual people. The corporate behemoth behind Terminator Genisys certainly would never suggest that you order your movie tickets online from your smartphone. And you probably shouldn't tweet or take an Instagram photo or post on Facebook about the movie afterward, because that's how the machines will finally win, if they haven't already. Director Alan Taylor offers a parable that aims to have its cake and eat it too, along the lines of this summer's Jurassic World, a similarly mediocre reboot of a groundbreaking action franchise, which warned us of the dangers of corporate greed within a blockbuster crammed with product placement from Mercedes-Benz and Samsung and Beats by Dre. Great science fiction strives to illuminate our daily lives through fantastical scenarios. Terminator Genisys kinda sorta tries to make a point about our reliance on technology while using glossy 3D imagery to milk pop culture nostalgia. Namely, the sight of Arnold Schwarzenegger once again kicking butt and making puns in the role that made him a superstar over 30 years ago. Admittedly, it's an amusing return at first. Arnold is older now, but as his Terminator character repeatedly insists throughout film, he's not obsolete. But watching him revisit the role at this stage in his life and career, the former California governor is nearly 70 now, too often feels like a recycling of greatest hits. You're sort of happy to hear these tunes, but they don't sound nearly as fresh as they once did. Taylor and his team have recreated with great care specific scenes from James Cameron's original Terminator, including the moment when Schwarzenegger's character arrives naked at Griffith Observatory and confronts a group of punks. But then, this ultimately morphs into a Terminator-on-Terminator showdown, with the younger Schwarzenegger fighting his current self across generations. Because you see, Terminator Genisys messes with the timeline, or rather, timelines. The script from Leda Kalogridis and Patrick Lussier indulges in multiple and intersecting time travel streams with varied and complicated outcomes. It makes sense for a while if you think about it hard enough, and if precision matters to you within the internal logic of time travel's movies in general. But then a character delivers a line to his younger self in the absolute last scene that negates everything that came before it. It breaks the rules, and it feels like a cheat. Terminator Genisys begins, though, in 2029. Judgment Day has happened. Skynet woke up in 1997, the machines started thinking for themselves, and 3 billion people died in the ensuing nuclear annihilation. The leader of the surviving revolutionaries, John Connor, played this time by steely-eyed Australian actor Jason Clarke, sends his right-hand man, Kyle Reese, Jai Courtney, back in time to protect Connor's waitress mom, Sarah Connor, from the Terminator that's on a mission to kill her. The basic tenets of the mythology should be familiar to you if you've seen the previous 4 films in the series, and if not, Kyle catches you up in a long opening voiceover. But something happens as Kyle is being zapped back to 1984, a glitch both inside and outside the machine, which causes a tweaked timeline upon his arrival. Sarah, Game of Thrones actress Emilia Clarke, trying mightily to summon some of Linda Hamilton's grit, knows who Kyle is and knows why he's come. Schwarzenegger's Terminator is now her friend. Actually, he's a father figure, so much so that she lovingly calls him Pops. So now they all must learn to trust each other and work together to stop the apocalypse. This results in several exciting moments within its elaborate battles and chases and set pieces, as well as some genuine suspense. And the effects are consistently cool, although they aren't too terribly different from the liquid metal T-1000 effects that dazzled us in Terminator 2 Judgment Day back in 1991. This time, Korean star Byung-hun Lee functions in the Robert Patrick bad cop role. The fate of a school bus dangling precariously off the side of the Golden Gate Bridge and the people within it might give you vertigo. And man, has San Francisco been getting hammered lately between Godzilla, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, San Andreas, and now this. There's a think piece in there somewhere about Hollywood trying to exorcise the demons of instant high-tech wealth. Clarke can be genuinely compelling and even a little enigmatic as John Connor, who intriguingly is depicted as far less of a Christ figure than he has been in previous installations. Courtney is blandly hunky in a rare good guy role. And Emilia Clarke is plucky and likable in the warrior princess role of Sarah Connor, but there's a softness and a sweetness about her, a girlishness even, which makes her feel like a Muppet Babies version of the character. But for better and for worse, this is Schwarzenegger's show. His performance and his character's evolution are the reasons Terminator Genisys turns unfortunately jokey and self-referential to the point that it borders on parody. Schwarzenegger's one-liners helped define the franchise in its early years. They were a reflection of this flesh-covered machine's awkward, heavily accented attempts at assimilating with humans, and they provided much-needed comic relief. Here, when he says, "I'll be back," it's more likely to produce groans than grins. Schwarzenegger has turned into your elderly uncle, dancing like a goofball at your wedding after a couple glasses of champagne. He knows he's being silly, and he knows that you know, and that alone is supposed to be good for a laugh. But it's not. It's just sad. He has essentially become McBain. Clearly, it's time to say, hasta la vista, baby, once and for all. Plot. When John Connor, Jason Clarke, leader of the human resistance against Skynet, sends Kyle Reese, Jai Courtney, back to 1984 to protect his mother, Sarah, Emilia Clarke, from a Terminator assassin, an unexpected turn of events creates an altered timeline. Instead of a scared waitress, Sarah is a skilled fighter and has a Terminator guardian, Arnold Schwarzenegger, by her side. Faced with unlikely allies and dangerous new enemies, Reese sets out on an unexpected new mission: reset the future. Review. I went into Terminator Genisys with zero expectations. The trailers were generally terrible, and I was almost reluctant to see just how bad this was going to be, so it didn't really disappoint in that respect. There is very little to like about this film, and it's a million miles from the dystopian tone of the original two Terminators. Every single action scene has to have a shitty, unfunny one-liner, which takes away anything resembling tension. Emilia Clarke was hideously miscast as Sarah Connor, lacking any kind of empathy, and at no point did I care about her character. She didn't even come across as tough, just a pain in the ass. I was actually on the side of Skynet for this movie. Jai Courtney brings his brand of blandness to the normally intense character of Kyle Reese, displaying no personality whatsoever. Reese is supposed to be this desperate future soldier who has lived a hellish existence. He was kind of wiry looking, and Michael Biehn has this crazed look in his eyes where you questioned if he was in fact insane after all. In this movie, he has abs and perfect teeth, never looking like he has been in a single battle in his life. Arnold Schwarzenegger returns as the Terminator, which was sent back in time to protect Sarah Connor rather than kill her. Instead of being an emotionless killing machine, he is now called Pops by Sarah, who sees him as a father figure. This is easily the worst idea of the entire franchise thus far, and the Terminator is now basically just a joke. You can't help but feel like they are shoehorning Arnie into the story, especially trying to justify why he looks older. I used to want to see Arnie come back as the evil T-800, but why bother? We've already seen it, and he'll never better what he did in the 1984 classic. I don't see any way to keep this franchise relevant, as these new movies lack the grit of the first two, which will never be captured again. The first 30 minutes are set during the future wars and is what we as fans want to see. Basically, the opening scene of Terminator 2 as an entire movie with a real sense of terror and dread. Of course, we never get that, and it doesn't take long for Genisys to go into the overly complicated time travel plot. The music score from Lorne Balfe incorporates Brad Fiedel's iconic theme at the end and a few times throughout the film, but it's mostly forgettable, like the movie itself. There is nothing you'll give any thought to after watching Genisys, aside from, what did I just watch again? Byung-hun Lee was wasted in a small role as a T-1000, which we've all seen before. And that's the problem with this movie. At no point will you think, wow, I've never seen anything like that before. Remember, after seeing Terminator 2 for the first time and Robert Patrick's T-1000 morphs through the bars at Pesadero Mental Hospital? It was new and exciting. Nothing in this movie will make you think that, as it is just more of the same. Every action scene is done with CG overload, and there is very little that ever thrills or excites, so by the time the credits roll, you'll feel hollow. I was watching Terminator 2 recently, as it's one of my all-time favorite films, and you sometimes forget how masterful Cameron was at directing those movies. He brought heart and soul to the story, but also had some humor, just not too much. The script was really lacking in Genisys, and it didn't have really memorable lines, like, if a machine can learn the value of human life, maybe we can too. I hated what they did with the character of John Connor, which was ruined by the trailers anyway, but it's like they don't know what to do with him. Here's an idea. Show us the final future wars and what he does to actually stop Skynet once and for all. Overall, the first two Terminator films will always be the best. And so far, Salvation is the only other sequel I thought had some interesting ideas. It at least attempted to show us the beginnings of the future war, and I would have liked to see where that went, rather than filmmakers constantly trying to reboot the franchise. Here is the intensely unnecessary back to the beginning with a twist Terminator movie. It's as if it has gone back in time to murder our memories of the ancestral first film and crush the series' reputation. As well as many other fantastically irritating things, they have rebooted the spelling of Genisys. The old spelling of Genisys is an orthographic franchise which has been reinvigorated. They've reimagined it. They've upgraded it. It's left me in a state of paralysis. It's crushing every brain synapses. This is a personal crisis, and I may need analysis. And the basis of all this is that Terminator Genisys is the antithesis of enjoyable. Like J.J. Abrams' Star Trek, it uses the concept of time travel to rewrite how the story starts, but with none of the freshness and wit. It is shackled to its muddled and laborious plot variants and dialogue quotes from the original, and also to a concept that I think was always sentimental and wrong-headed. The idea of Arnie's Terminator turning into a good guy and now aged into a cutesy, grumpy old retainer. The drama shows us the backstory to what we think we know. The future rebels overrunning the machine's final stronghold in 2029, only to find the machines have sent their Terminator back in time to kill John Connor's mum Sarah. Now it is the dull Jai Courtney playing her rescuer Kyle. The uninteresting Emilia Clarke is Sarah. Jason Clarke is on boring form as John Connor. And even 67-year-old Arnold Schwarzenegger himself is under par, playing the lovable old cyborg himself, now cloyingly known as Pops. It's the sound his joints make. It's the sound his joints make, but things are reversed. Kyle and Sarah and adorable Pops have to terminate at birth. The machine's sinister old encompassing eye program called Genies, it's an operating assist. So I guess the annoying spelling has some point. This idea is incidentally not unlike Anthony Horrow with a Stormbreaker. The whole dreary business drags interminably on with not a single amusing or ingenious idea in its echoing metal head. A cynical franchise bot machine tool to clank into cinemas and gouge money out of people. I went into Terminator Genisys with zero expectations. The trailers were generally terrible, and I was almost reluctant to see just how bad this was going to be. So, it didn't really disappoint in that respect. There is very little to like about this film, and it's a million miles from the dystopian tone of the original two Terminators. Every single action scene has to have a shitty, unfunny one-liner, which takes away anything resembling tension. Emilia Clarke was hideously miscast as Sarah Connor, lacking any kind of empathy. And at no point did I care about her character. She didn't even come across as tough, just a pain in the ass. I was actually on the side of Skynet for this movie. Jai Courtney brings his brand of blandness to the normally intense character of Kyle Rhee, displaying no personality whatsoever. Reese is supposed to be this desperate future soldier who has lived a hellish existence. He was kind of wiry looking, and Michael Biehn has this gray look in his eyes where you questioned if he was in fact insane after all. In this movie, he has abs and perfect teeth, never looking like he has been in a single battle in his life. Arnold Schwarzenegger returns as the Terminator, which was sent back in time to protect Sarah Connor rather than kill her. Instead of being an emotionless killing machine, he is now called Pops by Sarah, who sees him as a father figure. This is easily the worst idea of the entire franchise thus far, and the Terminator is now basically just a joke. You can't help but feel like they are shoehorning Ares into the story, especially trying to justify why he looks older. I used to want to see Ares come back as the evil T-800, but why bother? We've already seen it, and he'll never better what he did in the 1984 classic. I don't see any way to keep this franchise relevant, as these new movies lack the grit of the first two, which will never be captured again. The first 30 minutes are set during the future wars and is what we as fans want to see. Basically, the opening scene of Terminator 2 as an entire movie with a real sense of terror and dread. Of course, we never get that, and it doesn't take long for genies to go into the overly complicated time travel plot. The Geth music score from Lauren Belf incorporates Brad Fiedel's iconic theme at the end and a few times throughout the film, but it's mostly forgettable like the movie itself. There is nothing you'll give any thought to after watching Genies aside from, what did I just watch again? Brian Hunley was wasted in a small role as a T-1000, which we've all seen before. And that's the problem with this movie. At no point will you think, wow, I've never seen anything like that before. Remember, after seeing Terminator 2 for the first time in Robert Patrick's T-1000 morphs through the bars at Pasadena Mental Hospital, it was new and exciting. Nothing in this movie will make you think that, as it is just more of the same. Every action scene is done with CG overload, and there is very little that ever thrills or excites. So by the time the credits rolled, you'll feel hollow. I was watching Terminator 2 recently, as it's one of my all-time favorite films. And you sometimes forget how masterful Cameron was at directing those movies. He brought heart and soul to the story, but also had some humor, just not too much. The script was really lacking in geniuses, and it didn't have really memorable lines, like if a machine can learn the value of human life, maybe we can too. I hated what they did with the character of John Connor, which was ruined by the trailers anyway, but it's like they don't know what to do with him. Here's an idea. Show us the final future wars and what he does to actually stop Sky at once and for all. Overall, the first two Terminator films will always be the best. And so far, Salvation is the only other sequel I thought had some interesting ideas. It at least attempted to show us the beginnings of the future war, and I would have liked to see where that went, rather than filmmakers constantly trying to reboot the franchise. Genisys is a generally horrible movie, which is only redeemed by the first 20 minutes set in the future, but the rest is as lifeless as the Terminators themselves. The central thrust of the scattered, clanging, and unwieldy Terminator Genisys is that the cloud will destroy us all. Now, they don't exactly call it the cloud as they do in last year's sex tape, but maybe that's straining Camber and Diaz. Jason Segel comedy was onto something when it warned us that uploading information and then syncing all our electronic devices to each other might be a dangerous thing. After all, here this revolutionary but eel system is called Genies. It goes online on a specific day in 2017. There's a countdown clock and everything in an effort to magnify the tension. It's even a pleasing shade of light blue. And while it promises to link your phone, tablet, laptop, etc., the convenience it offers might come at a cost. It might, mean the end of the world as we know it. We're all on our devices too. Much anyway. A heads down, necks craned, eyes glazed, clueless to our surroundings, and careless about other actual people. The corporate behemoth behind Terminator Genisys certainly would never suggest that you order your movie tickets online from your smartphone, and you probably shouldn't tweet or take an Instagram photo or post on Facebook about the movie afterward, because that's how the machines will finally win if they haven't already. A director, Alan Terr, offers a parable that aims to have its cake and eat it too, along the lines of this summer's Jurassic World. A similarly mediocre reboot of a groundbreaking action franchise which warned us of the dangers of corporate greed within a blockbuster. Crammed with product placement for Mercedes-Benz and Samsung and beats by drum. Great science fiction strives to illuminate our daily lives through fantastical scenarios. Terminator Genisys kinda sort of tries to make a point about our reliance on technology while using glossy 3D imagery to milk pop culture nostalgia. Namely, the side of Arnold Schwarzenegger once again kicking butt and making puns in the role that made him a superstar over 30 years ago. Admittedly, it's an amusing return at first. Arnold is older now, but as his Terminator character repeatedly insists throughout film, he's not obsolete. But watching him revisit the role at this stage in his life and career at the former California governor is nearly 70 now, A2, often feels like a recycling of greatest hits. You're sort of happy to hear these tunes, but they don't sound nearly as fresh as they once did. Taylor and his team have recreated with great care specific scenes from a James Cameron's original Terminator, including the moment when Schwarzenegger's character arrives naked at Griffith Observatory and confronts a group of punks. But then this ultimately morphs into a Terminator-on-Terminator showdown with the younger Schwarzenegger fighting his current self across generations because you see Terminator Genisys messes with the timeline, or rather timelines. The script from Emilia Clarke and Patrick Lacera indulges in multiple and intersecting time travel streams with varied and complicated outcomes. It makes sense for a while if you think about it hard enough. And if precision matters to you within the internal logic of time travel's movies in general, but then a character delivers a line to his younger self in the absolute last scene that negates everything that came before it. It breaks the rules, and it feels like a cheat. Terminator Genisys begins, though. In 2029, Judgment Day has happened. Skynet woke up in 1997. The machines started thinking for themselves, and 3 billion people died in the ensuing nuclear annihilation. The leader of the surviving revolutionaries, Ajon Kanora, played this time by steely Australian actor and Jason Clarke, sends his right-hand man, Kyle Reese, Jai Courtney, back in time to protect Connor's waitress mom, Sir Connor, from the Terminator that's on a mission to kill her. The basic tenets of the mythology should be familiar to you if you've seen the previous 4 films in the series, and if not, Kyle catches you up in a long opening voiceover. But something happens as Kyle is being zapped back to 1984. A glitch both inside and outside the machine, which causes a tweaked timeline upon his arrival. Sarah Game of Thrones, actress Emilia Clarke, trying Millie to summon some oak fowl in the Hamiltons. Grit knows who Kyle is and knows why he's come. Schwarzenegger's Terminator is now her friend Day. Actually, he's a father figure. So much so that she lovingly calls him Pops. So, now they all must learn to trust each other and work together to stop the apocalypse. This results in several exciting moments within its elaborate battles and chases and set pieces, as well as some genuine suspense. And the effects are consistently cool, although they aren't too terribly different from the liquid metal T-1000 effects that dazzled us in Terminator 2 Judgment Day back in 1991. This time, Korean star Lee Han-leo functions in Thier, Robert Patrick a bad cop role. The fate of a school bus dangling precariously off the side of the Golden Gate Bridge, and the people within it. I might give you vertigo. And man, has San Francisco been getting hammered lately between Godzilla, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, San Andreas, and now this. There's a think piece in there somewhere about Hollywood trying to exorcise the demons of Einstein high-tech wealth. Clarke can be genuinely compelling, and even a little enigmatic as John Connery, who intriguingly is depicted as far less of a Christ figure than he has been in previous installations. Courtney is blandly hunky in a rare good guy role, and Emilia Clarke is plucky and likable in the warrior princess role of Sir Connor, but there's a softness and a sweetness about her, a girlishness, even which makes her feel like a Muppet Babies version of the character. But for better and for worse, this is Schwarzenegger's show. His performance and his character's evolution are the reasons Terminator Genisys turns unfortunately jokey and self-referential to the point that it borders on parody. Schwarzenegger's one-liners helped define the franchise in its early years. They were a reflection of this fleshy covered machine's awkward, heavily accented attempts at assimilating with humans, and they provided much-needed comic relief. Here, when he says, "I'll be back," it's more likely to produce groans than grins. Schwarzenegger has turned into your elderly uncle, dancing like a goofball at your wedding after a couple glasses of champagne. He knows he's being silly, and he knows that you know, and that alone is supposed to be good for a laugh, but it's not. It's just sad. He has essentially become McBain, based on the stupid title, initial plot description, and Entertainment Weekly photos. I was a little more than skeptical about a Terminator Genisys. Even though the synopsis had many, Amana, things I love in it, time travel, Emilia Clarke, Arnold Schwarzenegger, alternate timelines, Emilia Clarke, it sounded too goofy to possibly work. Then I saw the first trailer, See Below, and started to change my tune. I happened to sort of stumble upon the fact that the movie was out this weekend, and yesterday evening implied my best friend to come see it by offering to pay for his ticket. But in seats for the very first showing of Fajins, I was prepared for disappointment. We all know the story. Savior of humanity, John Connor, Jason Clarke sends Kyle Ree, Johnny Courtney, back in time to prevent the Terminator, Arnold Schwarzenegger, from killing his mother, Sarah, Emilia Clarke, before John is born. However, Kyle finds himself in a very different situation shortly after his arrival in 1984. What follows is a bit of timey-wimey shenanigans that only Thea Terminator or a franchise can provide. To say any more, then that would really ruin the surprise. First off, you can barely tell that Arnold Schwarzenegger is 67 years old. The man's charisma is absolutely infectious, and seeing him in the leather jacket and sunglasses that made him a household name is like coming home again or putting on your favorite well-worn pair of shoes. He's perfect. He's a finely aged wine. He's our goddamn Schwarzenegger. He delivered every one of his lines with a delightfully robotic quit. And I could honestly spend the rest of the review just talking about his performance, but that's not very fair to the other people involved. While she's no Linda Hamilton, is anyone? Emilia Clarke, as well as the new Sarah Connor. She's a lot more well-adjusted to her situation than the Sarah Connor of yesteryear, and is more than capable of protecting herself. Jai Courtney, who has come a long way since being super-duper Blandina, a good day to die hard, is our Kyle recent. I'll be honest, I'm for it. He didn't break new ground or completely change my movie-going experience or anything, but he was a sturdy male protagonist, and when you're starring opposite Arnold Schwarzenegger, that's all you can ask for. Jason Clarke's John Connor was dark, brooding, and scared inside and out after 30-some-odd years of fighting Terminators, and he really sold it. These four are joined by Matt Smith in a brief but significant role that was blissfully kept under wraps, unlike many other facets of the film, courtesy of the bastardly second trailer, and J.K. Simmons in a more substantial but similarly all-too-brief role as a detective. Finally, and I would be remiss to forget him, a Liang Hanofi saw the devil, and a G.I. Joe's the new T-1000. He is menacing and carried that same icy cool Robert Patrick had a T2 Judgment Day. I was really very surprised with the effects seen at Genisys. I expected them to look good, but I'll be damned if they didn't look great, all of the Terminators and other Skynet enemies looking amazing. The liquid metal looked real. And most importantly, the battle between present-day Arnold and Circle 1984 Arnold was incredible. To my admittedly untrained eye, there was zero uncanny valley, and he looked fantastic. Springboarding off of the effects, the action was almost non-stop. From the final assault on Skynet in 2029 in the beginning of the film, the movie goes, the aforementioned fight between two Arnolds, a handful of car chases, a pretty excellent battle against the T-1000, and a wonderful final battle. All of it was great. I don't think I rolled my eyes during any of these sequences and after the last two films. I think that's a very good thing. A most important, of course, is the writing. I don't want to say too much because of all the moments where I wish I hadn't seen that stupid second trailer or any TV spots or heard any ads on Spotify or seen half of the film's posters. But what you will say is that it was an awesome movie, full of twists and turns, and fortunately some surprises, which is impressive considering how hard they tried to ruin it with spoilers. There's some fun time travel stuff, and at one point I was like, oh, it's like Terminator or so, 12 Monkeys. But then I realized that at 12 Monkeys, it utilizes more or less the same time loop that Terminator does. If you think too hard about the time travel stuff, your nose may bleed, and you might feel the vein in your head start to pulse uncomfortably. But if you take it for what it is, it's a lot of fun. Terminator Genisys doesn't actually require too much knowledge of its preceding films to be an understandable film. The story follows Kyle G. Courtney as he is raised under the teachings of John Connor Jason Clarke in order to establish a rebellion that can finally take down Skynet. A is made obvious in the trailer. This film also incorporates time travel. No, the time travel aspects are not plot hole free or clever, but they're just about tangible enough to make the film coherent. Terminator Genisys isn't the sci-fi classic that the first two films proved to be. However, this film isn't old by its predictability. As long as you aren't entering the screen expecting an Orwellian and dystopia anyway, because it compensates for its mildly silly plot with pretty impressive CGI, fast-paced action, and a whole lot of airy being airy. Alan Taylor has stitched nostalgia into the seams of this film, and it really does a good job of holding the whole thing together. There are even some shots from the original film franchise. What the film does incorporate from modern life, though, makes an obvious but relevant point about the dangers of modern society living through the web. It's a believable enough issue to give the film some grounding, but not too adventurous. To tear huge sci-fi plot holes in it, this film, like the others, also has some focus on relationships to add a bit of humanity. The main relationship scene is the undeniably sweet bond between airy Terminator and Sarah Connor. The addition of sentiment to the T-800 model is an unexplained addition, but the welcome one because who doesn't love the idea of having Arnold Schwarzenegger as their awesome but dysfunctional father-grandfather? The other is a very Hollywood romance between Sarah and Kyle. Overall, the film is definitely worth a watch if you want to see Airy reliving his years as the beloved Terminator A. And if you enjoy robots fighting other robots against an ominous countdown to the end of the world, there is no denying that this film is fun, lively, and engaging on a purely entertainment level, but there is also no denying that it is not a high-class science fiction action production. The film isn't entirely without plotline, however, as there are a range of villains and plot twists to keep viewers reasonably engaged. The main pull factor, though, is A, as it always was, going to be Ari being very Ari. The fifth film in the Terminator or franchise, a Terminator, Genisys completely rewrites the Terminator or a Mythosa. When the human resistance, led by John Connor, Jason Clarke, finally wins out and destroys the artificial intelligence Sky in it, Connor reveals to that Sky needs a last desperate ploy was to send a Terminator back in time to kill his mother, Sarah Connor, Emilia Clarke, to prevent his birth. When Kyle G. Courtney volunteers to travel through time and save her, Connor willingly accepts A. However, A, when arrives in 1984, the timeline audiences are familiar with from the original film has been completely altered. ASA is no longer the innocent waitress from the first movie, but a hardened and well-trained fighter raised by another Terminator, Arnold Schwarzenegger, who she refers to as Pops. Pops was sent back in time, yet to be a guardian for Sarah after another Terminator killed her parents. Yet, while the circumstances may have changed, the mission has knotted together. Sarah Kyle, and the Terminator make their way through a T-1000 Linghan, a law enforcement A, and time itself, in an attempted to destroy Skynet and stop Judgment Day before it happens. Do old not obsolete, Dua, that saline brought up. More than one scene at Terminator Genisys, the latest installment in a franchise that goes back 31 years. I went into the film with zero expectations. A Terminator Salvation was a feces ban without side of ass fries, and when the film bombed in 2009, I figured that was the end for the murderous skeletons, and the Eye Overlord, the franchise, at least in my mind, had truly become obsolete. With all the negative reviews and general hate for a Terminator Genisys, I fully expected a melt of a film. Imagine my surprise when a genie sees it. Turned out to be a fun and at times thought-provoking film. The real risk for a Genisys was in rewriting the foundation of the original film. A1984 is a Determinator era, isn't just a film that helped establish both James Cameron and Arnold Schwarzenegger as major players in Hollywood. It's one of the best and most important science fiction films ever made. Odd's legacy and relevance endures 31 years later, where in 2015 humans have become more dependent on technology than ever before. Incidentally, Skynet's iteration in this movie comes in the form of Genisys, a global operating system set to link in virtually every device on the planet. To erase the Terminator's legacy sounds like heresy. Yet somehow it works, and credit that to director Alan Taylor. There's just the right amount of nostalgia. The T-1000, a face reforming after a shotgun blast through the head. Ares one-liners, the no fate but what we make speech, mixed with new action set pieces and a compelling new sky at dot. This film easily could have devolved into a two-art nostalgia fest, but Taylor strikes just the right balance. In a lot of my reviews, I usually discuss things like cohesion, a pacing, script, cinematography, etc. Forget all that. If you wanted those things, a go rewatch of The Last of the Mohicans. A Terminator Genisys is a fun summer popcorn flick and should be regarded as such. The action sequences, while not as epic T2A, are nonetheless phenomenal, especially the bus chase on the Golden Gate Bridge and the assault on Sky and its time displacement warehouse at the beginning of the film. Speaking of the future sequences, I'd like to point out that a Terminator Genisys did a better job in 20 minutes of screen time, showing Thea Machine, Ravaged War, Torn World of 2029. Day in a Terminator, Salvation did in 2 hours. The time displacement equipment was everything I always imagined it would be. Also don't worry about the time travel aspect of this film. You'll just get a headache. As the great David Tennant said in Dr. Paul, who? It's tiny wimmy Ironically, another former doctor, Matt Smith, plays a small but crucial role in this film as Alex Wright, a recruit who isn't all he seems. And how can you not love a sequence where Arnold fights the 1984 version of the Terminator? It's an Arnold versus Arnold, the battle royale, that lives up after the billing. The only thing I wish they'd done is cut in the original sequence with the punks from the first film, rather than doing a straight recasting. It would have been more appealing. It's still a cool scene in the CGI version of Schwarzenegger, as the 1984 Terminator isn't as horrible as everyone says it is. Granted, it's not great, but it's far from Jeff Bridges' Xenotron legacy. Terminator Genisys is not without its flaws. A film relies too heavily on CGI effects at times when practically fixed. So would have worked. He did just as well, if not better. Additionally, the attempts to utilize Schwarzenegger comically, a retiresome and overused Jason Clarke, left me tepid as John Connor. And while Jortney isn't nearly as bad as everyone says, Michael Biehn will always be Kyle Reese. Court Ortney had big shoes to fill, and his feet only went about halfway up the loafers. Emilia Clarke, of Game of Thrones fame, did quite well as Sarah Connor, as she brought a toughness and empathy to the character that I didn't expect. Clarke is far from Linda Hamilton's iconic Mother of the Future. However, and J.K. Simmons' role as Detective O'Brien was just god-awful. Forget not quite my tempo. There wasn't any tempo. A sequence involving acid in a T-1000 went along in pushing my complaints to the background, though. Sometimes all you need is one movie icon to make a film work. And for a Terminator, Genisys up. It's airy. Hey, he fits the role like an old glove. It's a testament to Schwarzenegger's determination and exercise regimen that at almost 68 years old, he can pull this off. He blasts a shotgun and throws a punch with as much vigor and passion as he did 30 years ago. His final battle is epic. And let me tell you, what happens to his character at the end of the film is all kinds of awesome. I won't spoil it, but let's just say Arnold gets an upgrade. Willie Terminator Genie. Caesar never reaches the lofty height so far the first two films. I don't believe that it was Alan Taylor's intent. Any attempt to do so would have been disingenuous. Rather, this film is just a fun action flick that supposedly is the start of a new trilogy. But stay for the after-credit scene and you'll see why if this ends up being the last film. However, it's a good capper to the series and goes a long way to wash the bad taste of fat Terminator Ray Salvation out of our collective mouths. The Terminator and the Terminator 2 Judgment Dump are arguably two of the best science fiction action movies ever made. They were hard, unrelenting, and iconic. The two movies that followed them, A Terminator 3A and The Terminator Salvation, were not very good. A Terminator Genie Caesar was a major improvement over those two sequels, but it still had some major flaws. I won't spoil the ending, but I'm going to discuss some details about the first Terminator films and some stuff about A Terminator Genie Sees It that would be considered spoilers. So, proceed at your own risk. The writers of Fat Terminator Genie Caesar clearly tried to come up with a good story. There was time and attention paid to details, and the plot was satisfactorily timey-wim and plot twisty, focusing on multiple timelines and time periods. Ultimately, it was a homage and hodgepodge of the best of Fat Terminator era and the Terminator 2A, while still managing to be its own thing with a new threat and continuity. Seriously, on paper, this movie was exactly what I wanted. They even managed to pull Arnold out of retirement to yet another new version of the good Terminator, so why didn't it totally work? What was wrong with this film? In short, it was too complicated, and the shadows of the original actors made it hard to connect to the new actors standing in for these iconic roles. Sarah Connor was one of the original female badasses. She was unhinged and lethal and very cool. This version of Sarah, played by a Game of Thrones as an actor, Emilia Clarke, started off as a badass. We didn't get to see her formative moments as a victim and her fight to become the strong character she eventually turned into. While the shorthand for her character arc meant she was already superficially cool, it undermined something important. We didn't have time to connect with her emotionally. We got an entire movie to fall in love with Sir Connor and to understand why Kyle went back in time for her. I'm not saying that Clarke's performance was lacking. She did a good job with the material she was given. I think the producers and writers felt that since we already loved the character, we didn't need to see her vulnerable again. And while this would have been fine if the same actress had been playing her, this was basically a fresh start. Unfortunately, the story wouldn't have allowed for that kind of flashback, and so they attempted to give her an emotional arc relating to her destiny. Although that arc did work to a degree, it wasn't nearly as effective as Sarah's original character arc. Unfortunately, while Clarke gave a decent performance, I cannot say the same for Jertney as Kyle Ree. He wasn't outright bad, but he actually said in an interview that he didn't even bother looking at Michael Biehn's performance as a baseline for his own, which was obvious because there was nothing resembling the Kyle Ree from the original film here. There was almost no hint of his borderline insanity or his desperation and hopeless romanticism. He has been boiled down to a stock hero with a bit more than a passing infatuation with Sarah. The tragic love of Sarah's life became a paper cutout, and that was more than disappointing. Okay, moving on from the characters, there was some really cool stuff going on in this film. The reproductions of the original Terminator-era scenes with alterations to the outcomes were just a blast to watch. The new T-1000 was nearly as intimidating a presence as Robert Patrick was in a Terminator 2 Judgment Day. There were references to Miles Dyson, and we even got some major fast time with John Connor, specifically the scene where he sent Kyle back in time to save Sarah. The action was generally very cool, but occasionally went on too long. There were a couple of breaks for character moments, but they didn't really feel long enough, or maybe they just weren't effective enough. Then, there was the major changes to continuity, which were all neat, but perhaps not as well thought out as they could have been. The story worked, and I did feel there was some major potential for the franchise to continue from where they left things. I felt there was a lot to like in this film, enough that the positives outweigh the negatives overall. Would I go back and watch it again and again? I'm not sure. I've only seen it once, but it did feel like a nice companion to the first two films. Perhaps additional viewings will bring out the good stuff and drown out the bad, or maybe the flaws will become unpalatable. The thing is, either way, I do want to see it again. The first Terminator was this new and different sci-fi horror masterpiece. Terminator 2 Judgment Day more or less ditched the horror and was this insanely large action film with incredibly good effects surrounding a new and unbelievable villain. Then the diminishing returns moment set in. Terminator 3 Rise of the Thek. Machines had some good things, but wasn't new or different in any way except in the philosophical direction it took the franchise. Terminator Salvation. Well, yeah, if you've seen, The point is that SAD's first two movies were special. They were extraordinary. They were just crazy in a way that few expected and played to people's fears beautifully. The next two were more generic action fare. So now, after a hiatus of a few years, and with Arnold Schwarzenegger back in a lead role after sitting out the last one, we get a new Terminator movie. And the question is, this is Terminator Genisys, like the first two films, or more like one of the last two? Not that the last two are in any way the same, except for the generic action. I apologize for disappointing you no matter what you want to read next, but Genisys is solidly somewhere in the middle. Judgment Day may be the greatest action movie ever made, so asking Genisys to live up to that is kind of a taller bodybuilder. Genisys is something closer to generic action than Judgment Day, but feels more a part of the franchise certainly than Salvation. But enough comparisons for now. Anyway, Terminator Genisys is the first movie in what could be a new Terminator trilogy, depending on how the box office receives this one. Directed by Alan Taylor, Thor: The Dark World Geniuses sees Arnold back as a T-800 and casts Emilia Clarke as Sir Connor, Jason Clarke as John Connor, and Jai Courtney as Kyle Ree as for what takes place in this movie. That's a little harder to describe. I wish I could offer up some easy sort of an explanation of it. When I was on set for the movie last year, they were all very tight-lipped about the plot. We were told it featured 3 time periods: 1984, the period of the first film, 2017, and 2029, the end of the war against the machines, when John sends Kyle back in time. They went so far as to tell us that in Genisys, we would see John send Kyle back to a very different 1984, one where a good T-800 would already be there and already have been watching Sarah for years. From there, things spin slightly out of control in rather convoluted fashion. Questions are asked, few answers are given, and the movie is propelled forward to its climactic action scenes. That last sentence offers up a hint about the weakest part of the movie. All 4 previous Terminator movies feel pretty self-contained. They have beginnings, they have endings, and even if you know that the story continues after the credits roll, you don't feel as though the story you have been given is incomplete. With Genisys, you very much do feel it is incomplete. One doesn't get the sense that answers aren't given because they don't exist, but rather because they are being held back for the next movie, or even the movie after that one. Genisys even features a sequence during the end. Credits, which further lends the sense that the Terminator films is just part of the pack-off franchises that we'll see over and over again, rather than the leader, the game chain roop it had been to some extent. Event the plot we're given feels that way. Sothers will undoubtedly also point out alternate version of 1984 offered here serves as a way to destroy the universe of the films, as we know it, and allows the producers to go off in any direction they want, rather than being beholden to already established canon. That is to say, In this way, it's incredibly reminiscent of the Star Trek reboot. In terms of the acting, we have seen John Connor recast over and over and over again, and Kyle Reese portrayed both by Michael Biehn and Anton Yelchin. Though Biehn is the iconic version, we have even seen Sarah Connor, played by two actresses, Linda Hamilton in the first two films, and Lena Headey in the Sir Connor Chronicles. Put another way, there is certainly precedent for recasting these roles, and something that most viewers will able to quickly accept. Most importantly, for a Terminator movie, Arnold Schwarzenegger has lost none of his charisma or any of his charm. He is a joy to watch on screen, and he slips back into the persona perfectly. Emilia Clarke delivers a great performance as well. She is something between the Sir Connor we got in the original film and the one in Judgment Day. She knows how the world stands, what the future holds, but she hasn't given up on humanity quite yet. Jason Clarke gives us a very different sort of John Connor than what we've seen before, no matter which version of John you're looking to. Clarke, as with Schwarzenegger, is compelling, but there's something that rubs me the wrong way about what they have done with the character. If you have seen the trailers, and now posters too, you know what's coming, but it isn't something I'll discuss here, except to say that without some of the plot that is presumably destined for the next two movies, I'm just not sure overall what to make of it. As for Jortney's Kyle Ree, that's easier. He feels too inexperienced, too young, too unable to cope with new information. This Ree is unprepared for anything that he hasn't been spoon-fed by a counter. That is less Courtney's fault than the way the role is written. By even so, Courtney is the least compelling of the actors involved. For all that doesn't work, however, we haven't even talked about the wonkiness of the alternate timeline and how that maybe should change things in ways it doesn't. Genie still has a whole lot going for it. Much of the action is great fun to watch unfold. The effects look outstandingly good as well. Plus, and perhaps it will be played up in future films. The notion that's touched on here, that humanity has essentially been begging for Skynet minus Judgment Day, is really quite smart. With that, the concept had been delivered in stronger fashion. You are going to find a lot of negative reviews for this movie, and I think the very act of making the movie in the first place opened it to criticism. Certainly, Terminator Genisys doesn't define or redefine things in the way that the Terminator or Terminator 2 Judgment Day managed to. But it's an entertaining 2 hours that show that maybe the franchise isn't quite as dead as it looked when the credits rolled on Salvation. I want it to be more self-contained than it is, but it still manages to be better than so many other options. In a summer of rehashed franchises, I quite enjoyed the Jurassic World. It isn't a great a movie, but it's a damn lot of fun. And the Mad Max Fury Road is one of best, most eyebrow-scorching action films in years. If you were hoping that a Terminator Genisys, the 5th installment in the Killer Robots from the future saga was going to fall somewhere in this realm, you will be disappointed. Lazy storytelling, messy CGI, and bland action combine to form a movie that the most natural reaction to is a slump-shouldered sigh and a muttered, "I wish that was better intended to launch a new trilogy." It doesn't bring enough or any new ideas to the table to warrant more. Genisys starts off on a bad foot. An extended voiceover from the new Kyle Ree. Jai Courtney tells you things that even people who have never seen one of these movies know about the Terminator or franchise. Skynet becomes aware and ruins the world, and John Connor, Jason Clarke, saves us all. From there, things proceed as expected for a while. On the verge of victory, the machines get off one last Hail Mary, sending a T-800, a heavily CGI'd Arnold Schwarzenegger clone, back to 1984 to kill Sir Connor, Emilia Clarke. So John will never be born, and the resistance will never come to life. But John sends Kyle back to save her. You've heard this story before, right? But from here on out, a Terminator Genisys rewrites the entire timeline. Some of the more skeptical among you might say it shits all over what came before, but I'll leave that for you to decide once you've seen it. It also ignores the last two movies, which is probably for the best. See, the 1984 Kyle Ree arrives in is not the 1984 that John Connor intended to send him back to. Sarah is not the meek, frightened young waitress we first met more than 30 years ago. In this new timeline, everything is different. She was raised by a Terminator, who she calls Pops, an age-appropriate Schwarzenegger. And after they rescue Kyle from a sticky situation, the newly established trio jumps through time, trying to wrap their head around all of these new changes and stop Judgment Day all over again. Along the way, they find new twists and villains, the biggest of which were utterly and completely spoiled in almost every last bit of marketing released for the film. People throw around the accusation that a trailer ruined everything more frequently than one actually does, but in the case of Fat Terminator Genisys, that claim is well-founded. When we first saw the big reveal in a trailer, most of us thought, okay, if they're willing to unveil this in a promo, there must be more. There must be some other secrets we know nothing about. But there aren't. They just blurted out the big secret for all to hear. It's like you walked onto a screening of F.A. The Sixth Sensei in 1999 yelled, "Bruce Willis is dead," and strolled out. I've never been one to be too bothered by spoilers. I can know what's going to happen and still enjoy a movie or show as long as it's told well. Unfortunately, that's not the case with the Genisys. The script from writers Lita Calligrides and Patrick Classier is very pleased with itself and thinks it's really smart and clever. While the reality is that the narrative is clunky and convoluted and a jumbled mess of half-realized ideas, they throw a huge illogical flaws at you when it comes to the science involved, making big statements of fact, like how Kyle can somehow remember two timelines, and you're supposed to accept them point blank. You want to raise your hand and ask, what? But when Pops, who is all of a sudden an expert in hypothetical time travel scenarios, shrugs and says theoretically as explanation, which he does multiple times, that's all you get. And there is so much talking. Part of what makes the Terminators so scary is that they're near-silent killing machines, relentless in pursuit of their goal. While you get a bit of that sense of menace early on when Lee Bang-han shows up as one of the liquid metal T-1000s, this time Arnold's T-800 won't shut the hell up, and most of his dialogue is overly convenient exposition. All of these flaws and many more problems can be forgiven if a movie of this ilk comes bearing to cast action. A Genisys, however, is not one of those movies. Directed by Alan Taylor, Thor, The Dark World. The big action set. Pieces here are flat and toothless. In this regard, the film peaks early on with a car chase involving the T-1000 that feels like a gritty A7's throwback, but everything else is just a tepid mishmash of questionable CGI choices and action you've seen countless other times in flat Hollywood wannabe blockbusters. Taking place partly in 1984, 8, Terminator Genisys revisits moments from the first movie, but with a new spin. One of the scenes I was most looking forward to is when the first T-800 arrives and diaries the gang of punks at the Griffith Park Observatory. We've known for what feels like forever that this time the scene would feature old Arnold, the throwing down with young Arnold, which sounds like a dream come true for 10-year-old me, but it isn't. Instead of one of the greatest action badasses of all time battling himself, it's a mess of pixels and poorly edited fisticuffs that is just one in a series of letdowns. Genisys revisits a few other iconic stops along the way, trying to deliver playful twists on lines like, "Come with me if you want to live," delivered by Sarah Connor this time, and "I'll be back." While these might elicit mild chuckles from the audience, they don't hit in any substantial way. In fact, they're mostly forced and don't fit naturally within the flow of their respective scenes. In general, I dig this new post-political career path Arnold Schwarzenegger is on. He's embraced the action elder statesman role, and for the most part in movies, like He of The Last Stand and The Sabotage, I'm on board with his choices. He's actually the highlight of Genisys. And though he's just continuing on with his stick from a Terminator 2, he's having fun with it, including a running joke about being old but not obsolete. A.J.K. Simmons, in a small part as a beleaguered detective with a link to these characters, is also a total blast. Underutilized to be sure, he's still as great as you might hope. The rest of the cast, unfortunately, is basically sleepwalking through this one. We've been watching him for a while now, and I think it's time to pull the plug on the idea of Jai Courtney as a leading man. He hits all the necessary beats, but he has zero charisma on screen. It's like watching a handsome man try to carry an action movie. While she's going through the motions of a badass warrior, Emilia Clarke displays none of the traits that make her character in A Game of Thrones is so watchable and engaging. In addition to being tough as nails, she has none of the edge Linda Hamilton or even Lena Headey and all the Sarah Connor Chronicles brought to the role. Granted, the script does neither of them any favors, and their relationship is tedious and mostly involves quips from Pops about mating with Kyle Ree. Sarah comes across like a teenage girl talking about sex with her dad, but it's not as funny as that sounds. Terminator Genisys Caesar isn't god-awful terrible. There simply isn't anything here to recommend. The drama is heavy-handed and tasteless, and the action lacks any attitude, edge, or sense of spectacle, which is almost impressive considering the number of explosions involved. Aside from being a cynical cash grab, while Paramount still retains the rights to the franchise, they revert back to James Cameron in 2019. You can't think of a single reason why this needed to happen, and the obvious dangling threads leave the door open for the future. I don't often root for a film to fail financially, but part of me hope has a Terminator genie seize a tanks just so they don't try to make any more. I debated about posting a review of Terminator Genisys because it is going to be tough to review without some spoilers. So, I will just say at the beginning, spoiler alert. Hey, I will do my best, but you've been warned. Terminator Genisys is our 5th entry in the Terminator franchise, and while I wasn't miserable watching, it is not a good movie. In fact, it is only better than 4 because it is muddled rather than boring. The story is so silly. I was joking on Twitter. It should be called Terminator Plunkin Bar. There is so much in this movie that makes no sense, thought, as some of the big reveals and the actions of characters come out of nowhere, and especially when you consider the first movie, which it plays into a lot, it makes even less sense, even down to the last line of the movie. I was scratching my head, wondering what the heck the director Alan Taylor was thinking. Pretty much it has John Connor in 2029 trying to defeat Skynet after the Judgment Day and War of Machines. As part of the initiative, he sends Kyle Reese back to 1984 to try and protect Sarah Connor from the T-800 of the original Terminator movie. We actually see a very convincing CG version of 1984 Arnold, but he is done away with very quickly. That is a problem this movie has in droves. It will introduce an interesting concept and then do away with it or forget about it for long stretches. There is also old Arnold, who has raised Sarah and is her protector. I debated about posting a review of Terminator Genisys because it is going to be tough to review without some spoilers, so I will just say at the beginning, spoiler alert. Hey, I will do my best, but you've been warned. Terminator Genisys is our 5th entry in the Terminator franchise, and while I wasn't miserable watching it, is not a good movie. In fact, it is only better than 4 because it is muddled rather than boring. The story is so silly. I was joking on Twitter, it should be called Terminator Broken Bar. There is so much in this movie that makes no sense. As some of the big reveals and the actions of characters come out of nowhere, and especially when you consider the first movie, which it plays into a lot, it makes even less sense. Even down to the last line of the movie, I was scratching my head wondering what the heck the director Alan Taylor was thinking. At the beginning, we also get a T-1000, who is a pretty cool, but a copy of what we had in Terminator 2, with the metal melting and all the same special effects. But he is also done away with fairly quickly. Then we get moved up 2017 because an app is going to be launched and they need to stop it, or Skynet will have control over everyone's devices. Now if you knew that this was going to happen, why wouldn't you give yourself a year, a couple of months, something with a little bit of time? They have to take down Skynet for goodness sucks and turn off an app that has 1 billion downloads pre-ordered, and they give themselves a week. I think Kyle Ree is played by Jai Courtney, and he is so bad. My theater was laughing at how he delivers the terrible dialogue. Other man should not be in movies. A stop at Hollywood. Ahi and Sarah Connor, played by Emilia Clarke, are supposed to have chemistry, but they don't. Apostrophe Ted is treated like a given. They are going to get together, and so there's no tension or witty banner or anything to enjoy. The characters are all pretty stupid. A, they know the T-1000 and other Terminators can't be stopped by bullets. And yet, what do they grab? More bullets and guns. Mark A, I kept thinking I'd try something else in an underground lair. There was acid in 1984 that will kill the Terminators, I guess, put there by Sarah. But why not take them immediately in that room and have a room like that built in your underground spot in 2017? Why bother with the guns and stacks of ammunition? Hey, why not spend your time creating acid guns that will spray at the Terminators? Plus, they have a Terminator with them. Why not use the one you have to convince other people to support them? A, they are continually chased by police officers and other humans when they could have had tons of support. A, they could have had the US government get tons of acid or magnets and destroy Skynet or something that was slightly smart. Magnets also destroy the Terminators. Never did I think an MRI would be a weapon in a movie. A go figure. Surely they could have come up with something powerful they could carry with magnets with all this time. Arnold says he was even working in Skynet when it was being constructed. You think he could have come up with something more helpful than crashing through walls and destroying security rooms? Skynet is also so poorly designed. It looked like the smoke and catwalk factories we've seen since the ATS. I don't know if they were trying to go retro, but it did not look like 2017 in any way. And wouldn't Genisys be developed in China in 2017? Would everything all be in one compound? The exact manufacturing and labs all there together? Plus, wouldn't they have the Genisys uploading some kind of server offsite if it was going to upload it to 1 billion devices in one instant? That's one heck of a compound. It doesn't make any sense. John Connor is played by Jason Clarke from Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, and he is so bland. He is supposed to be dealing with his parents, and yet none of them show any emotion or conflict. Ed is all shooting and explosions and a pretty cool bus crash. A Furious 7, also with a bus crash, teetering on the edge of a puss-up broken bar, had way more heart than this film, and this deals with the end of the world. It's not really his fault though, because he has very little dialogue, and most of the time is shooting at our heroes and getting beat down by an MRI. J.K. Simmons is also completely wasted as a cop who meets the trio in 1984 and spends 30 years trying to convince everyone alien robots to exist. He is the equivalent of the damsel in distress in a Superman movie. I debated about posting a review of Terminator Genisys because it is going to be tough to review without some spoilers, so I will just say at the beginning, spoiler alert. Hey, I will do my best, but you've been warned. Terminator Genisys is our 5th entry in the Terminator franchise, and while I wasn't miserable watching, it is not a good movie. In fact, it is only better than 4 because it is muddled rather than boring. The story is so silly. AI was joking on Twitter. It should be called Terminator. Ploth will sit your broken bar. There is so much in this movie that makes no sense. As some of the big reveals and the actions of characters come out of nowhere, and especially when you consider the first movie, which it plays into a lot, it makes even less sense. Even down to the last line of the movie, I was scratching my head, wondering what the heck the director Alan Taylor was thinking. Pretty much, it has John Connor in 2029 trying to defeat Skynet after the Judgment Day and War of Machines. As part of the initiative, he sends Kyle Reese back to 1984 to try and protect Sarah Connor from the T-800 of the original Terminator movie. We actually see a very convincing CG version of 1984 Arnold, but he is done away with very quickly. That is a problem this movie has in droves. Thought it will introduce an interesting concept and then do away with it or forget about it for long stretches. There is also old Arnold, who has raised Sarah and is her protector. At the beginning, we also get a T-1000, who is a pretty cool, but a copy of what we had in Terminator 2, with the metal melting and all the same special effects, but he is also done away with fairly quickly. Then we get moved up 2017 because an app is going to be launched and they need to stop it, or Skynet will have control over everyone's devices. But hey, now if you knew that this was going to happen, why wouldn't you give yourself a year, a couple of months, something with a little bit of time? Hey, they have to take down Skynet for goodness sucks and turn off an app that has 1 billion downloads pre-ordered, and they give themselves a week. I think Kyle Reese is played by Jai Courtney, and he is so bad. My theater was laughing at how he delivers the terrible dialogue. Other man should not be in movies. A stop at Hollywood. Ahi and Sarah Connor, played by Emilia Clarke, are supposed to have chemistry, but they don't. T is treated like a given. They are going to get together, and so there is no tension or witty banter or anything to enjoy. The characters are all pretty stupid. They know the T-1000 and other Terminators can't be stopped by bullets. And yet what do they grab? More bullets and guns! ! I kept thinking, try something else. In an underground lair, there was acid in 1984 that will kill the Terminators. I guess put there by Sarah. But why not take them immediately in that room and have a room like that built in your underground spot in 2017? Why bother with the guns and stacks of ammunition? Hey, why not spend your time creating acid guns that will spray at the Terminators? Plus, they have a Terminator with them. Why not use the one you have to convince other people to support them? They are continually chased by police officers and other humans when they could have had tons of support. They could have had the US government get tons of acid or magnets and destroy Skynet or something that was slightly smart. Magnets also destroy the Terminators. Never did I think an MRI would be a weapon in a movie. Go figure. Surely they could have come up with something powerful they could carry with magnets. With all this time. Arnold says he was even working in Skynet when it was being constructed. You think he could have come up with something more helpful than crashing through walls and destroying security rooms. Skynet is also so poorly designed. It looked like the smoke and catwalk factories we've seen since the ATS. Hey, I don't know if they were trying to go retro, but it did not look like 2017 in any way. And wouldn't Genisys be developed in China in 2017? Would everything all be in one compound? The exact manufacturing and labs all there together? Plus, wouldn't they have the Genisys uploading some kind of server off-site if it was going to upload it to 1 billion devices in one instant? Hey, that's one heck of a compound. It doesn't make any sense. John Connor is played by Jason Clarke from Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, and he is so bland. He is supposed to be dealing with his parents, and yet none of them show any emotion or conflict. Ed is all shooting and explosions, and a pretty cool bus crash. A Furious 7, also with a bus crash teetering on the edge of a puss-up broken bar, had way more heart than this film. And this deals with the end of the world. It's not really his fault though, because he has very little dialogue, and most of the time is shooting at our heroes and getting beat down by an MRI. J.K. Simmons is also completely wasted as a cop who meets the trio in 1984 and spends 30 years trying to convince everyone alien robots to exist. A he is the equivalent of the damsel in distress in a Superman movie, someone that exists to be rescued and to cry out and no way you're real. The redeeming factor in Terminator Genisys is Arnold Schwarzenegger, who has a lot of fun with the part, and I enjoyed he does a few callbacks to the original movies, but most of it is him behaving in a way consistent with the father figure robot for Sarah Connor. His personality actually makes sense, something I can't say for the rest of the characters. There were so many missed opportunities in Terminator Genisys. They could have done really cool things with the time travel in both 1984 and 2017, but it is also dopey. And like I said, a lot of the times I felt like sections had been left out and I was thinking, what? The acting is terrible. The special effects are lame with a few exceptions. A part of it felt like they were trying to look like Edge of Tomorrow, a movie that is actually smart and kind of involves time travel. Courtney is no Tom Cruise. I can tell you that much. Emilia Clarke is not nearly tough enough to be Sarah Connor, and they do not tackle a single element of time travel messing things up. They meet the young Kyle Reese. So, wouldn't Kyle recognize Sarah Connor when he sees her? And wouldn't he know Arnold isn't a bad guy because he saw both as a key? He has a picture of her, but only because of what John told him about Sarah. Well, and if Kyle Reese is a kid in 2017 and his kid John Connor is an adult in 2029, even if Kyle is a very young dad, that doesn't work. And if it is an alternative time dimension, having two Kyle and Jay should cause some kind of space-time continuum problem. Anyway, like I said, doesn't make any sense. It's really stupid movie. That said, you won't be bored. Arnold is kind of charming. I've seen worse movies, but especially when you've got such great movies in Terminator 1 and 2, it is very disappointing. They just stay home and watch those or give Edge of Tomorrow a shot. It should be obvious that a film is overly ambitious when you have the character known for his tears. Schwarzenegger using the great majority of his dialogue as forced exposition for the film. The film spends the entire time trying to explain and justify its existence, but ends up getting caught up in too many timelines and not enough coherent explanation. We are not novices when it comes to time travel or the cyclical nature of a Tina Terminator. Because it all makes sense. A John Connor Jason Clarke sends back Kyle J. Courtney to protect his mother Sarah Emilia Clarke, knowing full well that Ree is his father. That point is where the cycle begins, and it becomes complete when Kyle impregnates Sarah and then is killed while trying to explain that in this timeline, something else happens which we didn't realize before is a fool's errand. Welcome to what Terminator Genisys in this new impossible timeline as Kyle is sent back into a machine-based life form. Then, a mysterious force sends Sarah a T-800, the Schwarzenegger one to save her from a T-1000, the Mercury one sent to kill her. When she is 9 years old, she is then raised by the robot, who she lovingly calls Pops. Reese then arrives to a past where everything has changed. A new multimedia social platform called Genies is actually Skynet in disguise, and our once great human savior is turned into villain number one. The plot has more holes in it than a bowl of spaghetti. The time traveling alone is incoherently butchered as a vain excuse to introduce a new story with familiar characters played by completely underwhelming actors. If Matt Smith were actually utilized in this film more, maybe he could have made sense of their time traveling as he's done before in the iconic role of the Doctor from a Doctor who do a convoluted notions of time travel aside. This film is all about the studio effects and not the substance. Although there were killer robots since the beginning, the films were previously able to bring forth a sense of purpose or even a reason for being. Director Alan Taylor Thor. The Dark World fails to incorporate that semi-metallic art in Toa Terminator. Geniuses making the near scene foreign remake at the beginning, just a foreshadowing of how hollow and echo this film would turn out to be. The true hero of this film, and the reason many people are excited to see it, will be Arnold the Schwarzenegger's reprisal as a T-800. He has been the only constant in the entire film franchise, starting off as a villain and then becoming the savior. The most exhilarating part of this wanton CGI-laden mess was the battle of Arnold versus Arnold that happens early on in the film. We're smarter. I would have left after that battle completely satisfied. Sadly, I don't have the luxury of time travel like so many of the people and machines do in the film, where Terminator Genie both fails and succeeds, as in the way it panders to us as if we could be subdued with nostalgia and reworked references to the first film. And some information about it. How do you like our today's video? Please let us know by commenting, and if you like this video, please like it, share it, and forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.